Hey everyone, it's great that you could join us today to learn a bit more about Prophix and how it might be able to help you and your finance teams and improve your finance function. Just in terms of format, we've allowed 45 minutes. I'm going to spend about 7 or 8 minutes at the start just to set some of the context and some of the background. Then we'll have about 30 minutes of a product demonstration where we'll dive into the detail of how Prophix can help you with budgeting, forecasting, and with your reporting and analysis. Then we've got some time for some QA at the end and a bit of a wrap up and talk about next steps. So my name's Jesse. I'm the Business Development Executive here at Forest Grove. My role is really around engaging with our customers and trying to understand where they are at in terms of their finance or their digital transformation, and how we might be able to help them with the right technology solution or consulting or implementation. I'm also joined by Shaq. Shaq's a qualified CPA. Prior to joining Forest Grove, he spent 8 years in a management accounting role where his day-to-day was really around managing spreadsheets, managing the finance function for his division. So he's sort of been in your shoes. He's going to talk you through what his experience was like, and then he's going to take you through the hands-on demonstration of Prophix. Just so you can get the most out of today's webinar, there's a couple of things that are really going to help you. So we might run a poll in a couple of minutes. Throughout, there's a Q&A section. So if you have any questions, feel free to just put in the Q&A box. I'll be moderating that throughout. I'll answer the questions if I can. Otherwise, we'll take them at the end in our live Q&A. We will be recording this session along with all the other webinars that we've held. We'll make that available to you post the event. And the last thing is, book a free workshop. If you come through this, you're really looking at how can you improve your finance function, then we're offering a free workshop at the end to talk with myself and Shaq about this in more detail. So just to kick things off, there was a study that I came across that was run by Deloitte. It was a couple of years ago now, but I thought there was some really interesting findings. One of the questions they asked was, went out to about 300 people across CFOs, financial controllers. And the question was, what is your organization's greatest challenge with respect to managing financial processes? And I think the results are pretty telling. So 52% said manual processes and lack of automation, and 27% said obsolete or fragmented systems. So that's almost 80% of the respondents said that the biggest challenge was around the tools, around the technology. The other sort of key thing that I wanted to take out of this was, the question was, what is the main technology used to prepare budgets and forecasts? And 75% still using spreadsheets, and 16% are using spreadsheets plus some vendor planning tool like a TM1 or an SAP, where you can perform some function in Excel and then upload that into your system. So, huge numbers. I think that's 91% of people are still essentially using spreadsheets to run their finance function. And with all the finance professionals and finance teams that we work with, they have really good people, really smart people that want to be involved more in strategy and analysis and providing insights to the business and engaging engaging all stakeholders across the business. You know what the processes are, but it seems pretty clear that your biggest limitation is the tools that you're using. So that's what we're going to sort of talk to you about today and show you an example of a tool that can sort of eliminate some of these challenges and maybe get you into the 20% rather than sitting in the 80%. Just to illustrate that point further, so when we talk to customers, we talk about this finance transformation roadmap. A lot of people are sitting here in the spreadsheet anarchy. So you're managing multiple Excel spreadsheets, you've got to distribute them. If there's any changes, you've got to make multiple changes. If your exec team wants to ask what happens if this scenario played out, it's really time consuming. You can't get that answer to them in a timely fashion. It takes a lot of sort of manual processing. So you're sitting in this spreadsheet anarchy. A lot of people will try to do some degree of cash flow reporting, but because of the limitation around the tools, you might not do it quite at the level that you probably would like to, at that sort of more granular, fine detail level. You're achieving some degree of forecasting, but this might be on an ad hoc basis or half yearly. Whereas most people that we talk to are really trying to see best practices as getting to quarterly reforecasting at a minimum, but eventually to rolling forecast, so you've got some more agility and you can sort of lead the business in a more responsive fashion and take into account what's happening then and now and then. Collaborative business input, so they want to engage with operations, they want to engage with sales, with your cost center managers, but they just don't have the time to do that. So that's limited. And lastly, scenario planning, which is become even more sort of required with the sort of current environment that we're in, where things are changing so rapidly. But when you don't have the tools, you don't have your data in the right format, is really difficult. So where we like to try and help people get to is push up further on this finance transformation roadmap, so you can spend more time on analysis. So as your minimum standard, it's getting all your data consolidated, getting it in one source, so you don't have to be updating multiple sources. You've got some confidence in your numbers. From there, you can start to leverage that capability to do cash flow reporting in a timely fashion, get into a more granular level, move to quarterly forecasting or rolling forecasts. The sort of best practice is try and get to a rolling forecast within a few days of closing your end of month. Spend more time talking to your operations and your business partners, be that true finance business partner, and then be able to answer whatever scenario comes up. If there's some change in the external environment, if there's a change in your business strategy, if there's some event that, or if you're looking at acquisition, be in a position to be able to answer those questions and even sort of forecast those questions and sort of take them to your business. So that's where we sort of really trying to help our customers get to. And as we mentioned, the tool is a big part of that. If your biggest challenge is manually processing your data, then you can alleviate that. And Shaq is he'll take you through how we do that with our customers. So he'll take you through a hands-on demonstration of Prophix, and then at the end I'll come back with some more questions. So Shaq, over to you.
Thanks, Jesse. In my experience previously as a management accountant in commerce, it was often really time-consuming and difficult to manage multiple spreadsheets across multiple divisions and the different versions that would come to and fro. So so every month we would have, you'd have your typical period end closes, and then you'd have to do forecasts, high-level forecasts, and you'd have to send that out or have discussions with your different divisions. And depending on how far apart or how you're communicating with your ops managers, that can be quite challenging without the right tools and processes in place. So what I'm going to be demonstrating today is the planning and forecasting challenge that we all face, and we all know what they are. The issues of distributing the templates, receiving them, collating them, reconciling them, and making sure they match to your numbers, make sure all your numbers match to this, and the versions, having different versions coming to and fro. We're also going to talk about how we're going to use Prophix to plan and facilitate a forecasting process. The next stage of the demonstration, we're going to see how we can report and analyze data from this process in Prophix. And we'll have a live Q&A at the end. Now I'm just going to move into Prophix very quickly. We're now logged into the web client. Now we can see that we've got our dashboard here at the top. We've got my task on the left-hand side. We've got my favorite reports in the middle. We've got some tiles and badges for any metrics that you want to keep track of. Any metrics that you want to keep track of, or any charts that you want to view throughout the course of the month. You can also see that we've also got a Power BI embed below. So Prophix is really flexible in terms of configuring and bringing all this together. So this is a live link, and you can actually drill down into these numbers if you wish. Now, what we want to understand in considering the planning and forecasting process is that there are often time constraints. How much time is available to do a forecast? And it's usually a really tight timeline from when you've done your period end all the way to your close. So having a tool like Prophix becomes a necessity to assist with the agility that would be required of finance teams moving forward. So let's open up Workflow Manager within Prophix. Now, this is a really handy tool to use when planning out your process and seeing how the process will flow all the way from distribution to collation and finally approval. So in Prophix, we're going to click on Workflow, and we're just going to open this one up. And you can see this is how typically you might do your budget or forecasting process. You start with your budget or baseline preparation. You've got your revenue planning, you've got your OPEX planning and workforce planning. You might have some shared services planning, and you've got your CapEx planning. So typically this is how most organizations will be planning out their forecasting or budgeting process. And you can see that that's all split into further processes before getting approved, and finally by senior management and then the board. So what's really powerful about Workflow Manager is at a glance, you can tell where you're at in the process. Anything that's green with a white tick is something that's already completed. Anything that's blue with a white circular arrowhead, that's something that's in progress. So we're still waiting for submission and approval by the relevant parties. And then we can also see that there are also icons whereby you've got a dark blue background with a tree diagram in the middle. Now, those images are basically tasks that have yet to be begun, because tasks that have got the light blue tiles with the white circular arrowhead haven't been completed yet. So let's go back to our dashboard and have a look at some of these tasks that are in progress. Now, your administrator typically will assign these tasks out, and they'll get filled in by the end user. It'll appear in your dashboard like so under My Tasks. So all the end user would need to do would be to log into Prophix and have a look at their task, and they can actually see what they need to do. So let's click on Revenue Planning. Now we can see we've opened up this template, and it's a revenue forecast by customer. You can see the sales manager's name there. You can see the customer that it concerns. You've got your products on your left-hand side. You've got accounts next to them. You've got average quantity, average selling price, and revenue. You've got time running across the page, a total, budget, and a variance column right at the end. You can also see a variance column and a comments column at the end. And you can also see the revenue breakdown per month below. Now this chart will be interactive, and we'll make some changes and see how that impacts the chart. You can see that this is in data entry mode. Now I'm just going to minimize that so we get a clearer picture of the full screen of the template. Now, when we look at average quantity and average selling price, you'll notice that that's not a typical general ledger account. And that's because we're using a driver-based budgeting. So we're doing bottom-up budgeting. Now, Prophix is really powerful in the sense that you can actually set these up along with your general ledger account. So if you're using driver-based budgeting, it doesn't need to be separate. Like, for example, if you did it in a spreadsheet, it would be completely separate and not integrated into your ERP or any other system, and you'd have to populate that separately. But in Prophix, because we can configure it to actually populate the template with those type of accounts so that you can actually work out your revenue all in one system. And this is really handy when you're trying to report, because you don't have to get external sources and update a spreadsheet separately. They'll all be already stored within Prophix. Now, revenue, as you know, will be a general ledger account, and it's basically quantity multiplied by selling price. Now you can see that the first three columns here are grayed out, and the reason is because those are actuals, and the rest of it is basically something that we've configured to push numbers in from our budget. And that's be typical of how your base forecast assumption. You'd have your actuals come through for a period of time, and then going forward for the rest of the financial year, you probably populate it with figures from your budget or your forecast, or a previous forecast rather. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to have a look and see how we can actually do this quickly, or how your end user can actually do a forecast really quick. Because remember, we talked about time constraints and how pressed for time everybody often is, because this is an additional task on top of their day-to-day activities. Now, what we can do, and what Prophix is really good at, is having such functionality that will actually speed up the process. Now, what we can do is we can then select the cells here from October to June, and say we wanted to uplift that by, well, let's say we wanted to reduce that by 20%. Instead of going through cell by cell, changing them manually, or having a formula and copy and pasting that across, we can just select the entire row, right click, go to adjust data, and we can bring this down by 50% or 20%. We'll try 40%, see what happens there. Now you can see these numbers have all changed. And all we need to do to save this into Prophix is actually hit refresh at the top right-hand corner here. Once we hit refresh, the numbers are then written into Prophix. And you can see those numbers now flow through to your revenue and your chart below. So this is really dynamic. You can also save comments. So the user might be able to say he'll want to save a comment here, says this is a test comment. You can save that comment as well into Prophix. And this is a really quick and easy way for the end user to sort of make changes to their forecast. You can configure the template however you like to make it simple for your end user. You can use a combination of driver-based accounts and general ledger accounts to make it more relevant, because it's quite difficult to make it relevant to an operations manager, operations personnel when they're actually not facing the general ledger codes day in and day out. So driver-based forecasting or budgeting makes a lot more sense for them and really resonates, we find, with our customers. Now we're going to go back to the dashboard now and have a look at an example of another template that Prophix is capable of configuring for your business. We're going to have a look at workflow planning. You can see on your screen here a schedule that's been configured based on the requirements of the business. We've got your ID on your left-hand side. You've got your name of the users here. You've got the state, cost center, department, hire date, end date, category, annually or hourly, whether they are paid annually or by the hour, the position, base salary, and all the associated on costs here. The detailed planning manager module, which is what is used to create the schedule in Prophix, is really handy and robust at managing multiple drivers or possible combinations. So if you've got a slightly more complicated schedule, be it a CapEx schedule or a roster-based schedule for your employees or contractors, or even revenue, where you've got multiple factors or drivers actually required into creating the template or driving your revenue number, then using detailed planning manager is really handy it's a really handy tool to use. Now we can see annually and hourly and this position of manager for Hunter Myers, and we want to change that. All we need to do is we can say we want to do it at an hourly rate instead of a base salary, and immediately you can see that the schedule picks up the fact that you selected hourly and grays out base salary. What this does is it stops the end user from entering into and making an error in data entry. So if they wanted to make sure this employee was hourly, well then by selecting hourly, Prophix will automatically gray out the base salary. We can configure this in the background to suit your business in that manner. So now we can just go 50, for example, an hourly rate of $50. And now at the moment, you can see the total earnings hasn't changed. But again, I'm going to hit actions and I'm going to calculate. So Prophix is now going to take that new hourly rate into account and give you your total earnings figure of $105,700. And you can do that with as many lines as you require. So at the moment here, we only have 20, but we can change entity or department and configure that however you like. So it's very, very handy, and it helps a lot. The fact that this is not in a spreadsheet and this is done within Prophix. You can configure this, and as the individuals make the changes and they store that number when they hit calculate and within Prophix, what actually happens then is that it's stored. You don't have to worry about reconciliation. It's not in a separate spreadsheet, it's in Prophix. So automatically when you pull these numbers, because these will all go to general ledger accounts, you'll have the right numbers as being input by the user, and this will happen in real time. Once the user is happy, they can just hit workflow and submit. Now we showed you the workflow a little bit earlier. Now when you do a submit via workflow, you're not having to deal with multiple versions, because if the approver were to send it back, it's still sent through workflow. It's still that same version that's getting pushed back to the end user to make some changes. So it's really powerful in terms of helping you reconcile at the end of the budgeting or forecasting period, because you only have one source of truth, and that's whatever's stored in Prophix. Now we'll go back to our dashboard again, and we'll select the enter operational expenses budget option. And the template pops open. We can see it's in data entry mode. We'll just minimize that. You can see that we've got our chart of accounts here. You can configure this to display the entity or department, whatever is relevant to your end user. Time going across the page. And then we can see that cells that are grayed out are basically data coming in from a payroll model that we saw earlier. So if the end user wants to change it, very often they'll need to know what their expenses are going to be, but you don't really want them to change those numbers as they're coming from a different model. So if you were to click on it, Prophix will tell you again the cell that you're attempting to modify is not editable. So again, reducing the errors for data entry. Now, what's really cool about Prophix is that you've got a total column here. Now, there'll be many lines of expense accounts that you'll have. And sometimes there's a lot of detail required in the breakdown of those expenses, sometimes there aren't. So for those lines that are typically not a large portion of your expenses and are relatively immaterial to your business, but you still need to input data for, what you can do is you can go to the total column. Let's say we'll use advertising as an example, and we don't believe we'll do 550 in the next financial year. For example, in this case, we're going to do, let's say, 300,000. So all I need to do in the total column, as you can see, 300,000. And Prophix is brilliant enough to recognize the fact that, wait, hang on, we want to do a time spread method here because you're entering at a total column. How do you want to spread this data? So we can now choose to either spread evenly or spread based on existing data or any other bunch of metrics that you've got here. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you can spread this, but we're just going to spread based on existing data because we want to take note of the seasonality, and we just want to hit OK. So Prophix is now writing this information back into and actually pushing those numbers through now based on the seasonality that we've configured. So if you've got a forecast from the previous financial year, for example, and you can run a process to bring it all in for you, you can now actually just go, hang on, I like that seasonality, that's relevant because that's based on our forecast or our actuals from the previous financial year. So I'm just going to input a total that what I think we'll do for the whole year and just get Prophix to do the spreading back for me. So instead of entering it into 12 cells for one GL line, you can enter it at a total level and have that spread back if it's a minor expense and you don't want to actually think too much about how that's going to go for the next 12 months, 6 months, 18 months, however long you have to do the forecast or the budget for. So it's a really powerful function within Prophix that allows you to save time. And if you're worried that, hang on, there's so many changes going on and multiple versions and forecasts, well, Prophix has got data history, which is a function that stores any change that's made to the template. So if I go to advertising here, and if I select, for example, this cell and go data history, I've right-clicked on that cell, and we'll go to the last option here that says data history. And we can see all the changes that have been done to this cell. How it's been done, via spreading or via input. So again, it's really powerful because 6 to 8 months down the road, for example, after you've done a budget, there's going to be a lot of argy-bargy going on about who's done what. And oh, that wasn't the number I've done. And we've all had these arguments before, or had these discussions rather with your ops personnel. So about who has done what, and this is not the right version. Now, remember when we talked about workflow, how you're actually doing everything on that one template because it's now being saved and stored in Prophix. And the data history records the necessary changes. So we can always refer, hang on, if this wasn't the right version, where's the right version? There's no dispute anymore because you can just right click, look in data history and go, hang on, this was done for this template. So it really helps the finance team in helping manage this entire process, especially when you're cooperating with other members, non-finance personnel within your business and organization. Now, what we've seen so far is basically the use of Workflow Manager to map the process and take into account the time constraints to help finance distribute, collate, and reconcile and produce a forecast or budget in a timely fashion. And what we've also seen is that we can format templates with the appropriate amount of detail required and ease on input. We've seen how we can use driver-based accounts. We've seen how we can use general ledger accounts together in the same template. They can be written into and they can be saved and stored. And we've also seen how we can take into account 2 to 3 different metrics like entities and locations and customers in the detailed planning manager, for example, and actually put that all together to help minimize the errors that could be made by the end user in data entry for those particular templates. The next thing we're going to move into is going to be reporting and analysis in Prophix. Now, reporting analysis in Prophix is simple and intuitive. There are many different types of reports that you can do, from traditional financial statements to driver-based reports. There's also extreme ease in integrating and interrogating that data. We can build out data connections to wherever your source data resides, and bring that data into Prophix for you. There's also the ease in distribution and maintenance of reports. Now we're just going to go back into Prophix. So I'm just going to open up a report here. Open one up earlier, which is income statement by entity. Now, what I mean by simple intuitive reporting, there's nothing overly difficult about how this template or report looks. But the dimensionality in Prophix allows you to pull your different versions, such as actuals and budgets, together quite easily into columns to generate this report. You can see we've got our chart of accounts here. We've got the entity and the different entities within this business. You can see the date or the period end that it concerns. Now, if you wanted to view the detail in this actual data, for example, all you would need to do in report mode is actually right-click and look at the option that says drill across. Now, what drill across does is that it goes into the source data and pulls that up for you. So because Prophix is now connected to your ERP or your payroll software or anything like that, it's now able to bring this data across. And in this case, it's revenue. We can see the account, the department, the month, the value, GL code, as well as invoice if the ERP supports that function. And you can save this data by downloading it into Excel for further interrogation or analysis. That's incredibly powerful and time-saving, as opposed to doing it on a spreadsheet and then still having to go back to your ERP. Because once you have to go back to your ERP, again, it takes you away from having a look at a high level and just quickly having a look at what were the transactions and identifying those errors and making comments on those for your period end reporting. Now, I'd like to actually point out another interesting feature that helps with interrogating data within Prophix. What we can do here, for example, we're now at entity 1 and we're looking at actuals. We can actually right-click that and then select Analyze. Now, when you select Analyze, what happens is that Prophix will dump the skeletal structure of that report effectively into ad hoc analysis. Now, this is a tool whereby you can have a look at different types of data, or the same set of data in different ways, rather. Here we go. Like, we've got department on the side here, together with time, reporting currency, and time perspective. You can see the chart of accounts here on your left-hand side, and you can see across the page, we've got entity, actual, budget, and variance. And say, for example, I wanted to look at gross revenue for the month, over time, over the few months. What I can do is I can actually move my cursor, and you can see the 4 arrowheads appear. I can actually drag this across. I've clicked on it, I'm dragging it across, and you can see how there's no longer a circular black mark with a cross, and it allows me to drop this into gross revenue. Dropping it into gross revenue, I can now see the individual months for the financial year and revenue, for revenue across all the different entities. We've not had to create a brand new report from scratch, because if you were doing this in Excel, you'd have to create a brand new report from scratch. All we're doing is we're just having a look and see, is this the sort of data that might be relevant or might be useful for us? If it is, we can then click on File and save it as a data view. Once we save it as a data view, we can use this as a base for a new report. It's that quick and easy. You can also download this to Excel to play around with if you like. But let's have a look at something else. Let's have a look at reporting currency. Again, I'm selecting this, dragging this across, dropping it there, and you can see revenue across the divisions by currency if you've got multiple currencies. So it's really that flexible. And this is all depending on how your business operates and what your preference for dimensions are. And we can design and configure that for you so you can actually report quickly and accurately at the end of the month. Prophix is also very powerful for binding these different reports together and distributing them to your end users. Now, everybody's registered with an email in Prophix, and that's how you log in. And what happens then is that, say, for example, you can now actually use the report binding function within Prophix to generate a report and compile different reports. at the end of a period, be it month end or quarter end or annually. And for example, this, I'm just clicking on the financials reporting pack and just downloading it. This was compiled using Prophix's report binding function. Now you can see this is the annual corporate review and financial statements, and it's a combination of Word documents, because you can see that these are Word documents and Prophix reports, as you can see here. Now this is a really powerful tool because you can actually start to configure your reporting in Prophix and having Prophix distribute that to all your registered end users. And Security Manager will handle the reports that need to go out to the different users and limit them to the reports that they are only that only apply to them. So it's a really powerful function within Prophix that helps save time for the finance team at period reporting ends, because they can be very challenging. Now I'm just going to summarize what we've seen now in the reporting and analysis side of things in Prophix. We've seen how simple and intuitive the reporting is. We've seen how we can do different types of reports. And if it's not quite to our liking, we can actually put it into ad hoc analysis and then change the template or change the layout of the dimensions of the report. And we can save that into a template for a new report very quickly and easily. We don't have to go back into the ERP and download it into Excel spreadsheet, into another Excel spreadsheet and create another report. It can be done on the fly. We've seen how we can interrogate data once it's connected into Prophix, and we're looking into the source data system. So into a data warehouse where all the data is stored, both for driver-based accounts as well as general ledger accounts. And we've seen the ease of distribution and maintenance of reports via Prophix and the distribution via the report binding function. And through workflow, again, you can send this out to your end users. So we come to the end of this short demonstration. If you've got any questions or clarifications, let us know.
Thanks, Shaq. That was a really good way of just showing how the right tool can help alleviate that major challenge around manually processing data. So we have a couple of questions. Before we sort of finish things up, we'll just do a couple of questions. So the first one is, once you've got your data into a system, it's all consolidated, you got that single source, you might have put in some forecasting or some reporting. What would it then take to be able to get to, say, that sort of higher order function like scenario modeling or something along those lines?
So that would typically depend on the size of the organization, the scope of the project or implementation rather. So yeah, it would really be what we adopt an agile methodology when it comes to implementing projects. And what we do like to do is generally come in through, if it's in the forecasting cycle of things, what we normally recommend is we'll do reporting and analysis first before we go into preparing the budgets and templates. It's a lot easier for the end user to digest, and you can get quite a lot done quickly. And we find that after you've done that reporting and analysis in Prophix, then the curve is less steep to move into something like budgeting, forecasting, planning, 3-year modeling. So we find that with the small order goals of getting the right reports at the right numbers, after integrating into all the source data or uploading via spreadsheets, you can then shorten that transactional curve. So it depends. The answer is that it depends, depending on the size of the organization and the amount of detail they want in the scope of the implementation.
Okay. All right. So there's no other questions that have come through. So in terms of just wrapping things up and talking about sort of next steps, just get my slides working. So this is one of a series of webinars that we've held. You can see we've run a whole range of interesting topics. The most recent one was on cash flow planning and forecasting. All of these are available through our YouTube channel, and we'll share that link with you. But if you're interested in learning more, you can go back and have a look at some of these different topics. Lastly, I just want to touch on sort of how we work in terms of the finance transformation space. So we've been working with a whole range of businesses for 16 years. We started in finance transformation, but that's evolved into more, we offer a broader range of data, digital transformation as well as visualization. So we've had the chance to partner with a whole range of finance teams across Australia and New Zealand for the last 16 years. And you can see sort of the range of industries, the range of companies that we've worked with. So this is sort of where we built up our experience from, and we've seen a lot of what we've spoken about today really work with these organisations. And just moving on to the last slide, if you are interested in learning more, if you want to sort of talk about your finance transformation journey in more detail, then we're offering free workshops. So there's a free finance transformation workshop with myself and Shaq. My details there, but we'll contact you as well. So if you want to talk about this in more depth, and that's around talking about around the tool, but also around your processes, how you might be able to engage your people a bit more, then we're offering these free workshops for people that attended today. 1 hour session, and I'm sure you'd get a lot of value out of it. So we'll contact you around that, but my details are there. Thanks for attending today, and we look forward to talking to you soon.